Hey everybody, welcome back to Industry Night with me, Nycci Nellis. Here I am once again at the beautiful Wine Lair in downtown DC, talking to you about a deep dive of what's going on in the industry, not just locally, but nationally. So if you're new here, hi, thanks for joining me. A little bit of background. I've been covering the DC food, wine, and hospitality scene for the last 20 years via the list, areyouonit.com, the online e-zine that tells you absolutely everything that's happening in the DC metro area. Now, that little platform helped me do so many other things. So you follow me on social media at NYCCI, NELLIS, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. I don't know, wherever I'm supposed to I do it. And you can hear me every Sunday with my husband David on Foodie and the Beast, now on air for 14 years, DC's only food and wine variety show on 1500. Of course, you can download that as well. You can hear me on WTOP, where I talk about all the things going on in the DC metro area. What else? I don't know, man. I am out and about and talking about everything happening in the food, wine, and hospitality scene. So, if you follow me on social, you know I eat out an awful lot. And normally at this part of the show, I take you on a tour of where I've been eating. But my guest today is kind of competing with me to see who eats out more. And then we like to compare our experiences. So I'm going to bring that on later in the show today because we're going to do a Where Have You Been at the end of the show.
I'm going to lose this competition.
He is going to lose, but that's okay. It's not a competition. So I love having good friends on my show because it just is a wholly different vibe. And just because Chris Floyd is a friend doesn't mean we don't have a whole lot to talk about. So every show I end by reminding people to take their kindness pills and remember that there are staffing shortages in the industry, not just locally, but nationally. I do it every single show because there are staffing shortages in the industry. It's a real thing. And who better to talk about that than one of the most sought after recruiters in the hospitality industry, Capital Restaurant Resources, Christopher Floyd. Hi, Chris.
Hi, good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you for joining me today.
Very exciting.
Okay, so before we get into what is a restaurant recruiter, who are they, what do they do, tell us first a little bit about you because I know you had your own chefing days.
I did quite a while back, but yeah, I grew up in this area and started cooking when I was 16. Mm-hmm. My first job was at Le Chardon d'Or in Alexandria at the Morrison House Hotel, which still exists. And to date me, Robert Wiedemeyer was the sauté cook there, and I was a little 16-year-old punk called me.
Oh my God. Wait, so how old was Robert?
He was probably 21. He was probably 21, 22.
Okay.
So he was a young guy, and I remember him because he was like the sauté cook. And
was he also really mean?
Yeah, he yelled at me every night.
Yes, without a doubt.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, that's how it went. But now we're friends. So yeah, it was a good experience. But anyway, I ended up going to CIA, moved out to San Francisco, and basically rose up through the ranks there. Mm-hmm. Worked mainly in fine dining for Michael Mina and folks like that, Mandarin Oriental Hotel. Basically had our first child, couldn't afford a house in San Francisco, moved back here.
And that was a while ago.
That was in 2003, end of 2003.
Now nobody can afford a house in San Francisco.
I don't know how they do it. Anyway, and then was planning on opening my own restaurant because I'd been an executive chef a couple of times. Mm-hmm. Long story short, I ended up opening CRR, a recruiting firm, in 2004.
Okay, yeah, but where did you get that idea? Like, I mean, how do you go from being in the kitchen to being like, I can staff a kitchen? That's a transition.
Yeah, so I'd worked with a couple of recruiters, or one in particular in San Francisco, and when I was looking to move back to DC, I kept asking people like, who's a recruiter on the ground in DC? Because there were those people in New York and San Francisco. Right. And essentially in 2003, there wasn't that person in DC. Mm-hmm. Because DC, if people remember, wasn't so exciting back in the 90s in terms of culinary. I mean, there were steakhouses and a few good restaurants, but like...
can I please, I feel like I said this on multiple shows, but we didn't have the breadth and depth that we have today because we didn't have the real estate.
No.
And we also didn't have the people.
No.
I mean... there was intention
right.
to have that real estate because obviously it doesn't get funded overnight.
Right.
But 14th Street, Navy Yard, the Wharf, all the Bloomingdale, LaDroit. I mean, all these areas, Shaw, they didn't exist.
No, they didn't exist. I mean,
Right.
DC's had this huge renaissance. I mean, if you wanted to go out back in the 90s, it was kind of downtown, K Street, DuPont, or Georgetown.
Right.
And that was it.
Georgetown, DuPont, a little Foggy Bottom, because of the Kennedy Center,
yeah.
and a tiny section of Capitol Hill.
Tiny section of Capitol
Yes,
Hill, yes.
totally with you.
Yeah.
But that's because that's all that really was needed, right? You only had so many people here back then.
Yeah.
And only so much space.
Well, and then, I mean, I think there was a real renaissance starting in 2000s of the whole city. And, money, millennials, lots of people came out here. 14th Street exploded, which just blew my mind because that was pretty down and dirty. And prostitutes and drug dealers that's all you saw on 14th Street. And now it's like this, now you walk down it and you just see all these, millennials going out, and it's great.
No, it's not just millennials.
Well, you too. I know you're there.
Gen Xers, Gen Zers, Boomers. Everybody is there. None of it is specific to age.
Sure, but that influx of young people who wanted to go out, who wanted to frequent these places, definitely changed the landscape. And I think you've seen the city really move east. And then, of course, as you point out, like the Navy Yard, the wharf didn't exist.
Right. I mean, they weren't even there. Created, which I think is so interesting.
It is interesting, yeah.
Okay, so prior to this explosion of real estate and the infusion of or need for chefs for all these restaurant spaces, because with the explosion of real estate comes, I want a restaurant in here.
Right.
I want a bar in here.
Exactly.
So you were a little, which came first, chicken or the egg? You were a little before it.
Well, so my friend and I actually did a business plan for a restaurant, and then and it was a good business plan. But
I have no doubt.
it had a wine bar component. At the time, there were only 2 wine bars in DC, which I found kind of shocking.
Right.
Anyway, he backed out. I had been kicking this idea around the back of my head, and basically decided to give it a go. Read a couple books, bought a new computer, built a website, and off to the races.
But how did you go about, so in your business, there are 2 sources that you need to have.
Right.
You need to have restaurateurs and people in the industry, whether hospitality industry, whether it's hotels, restaurants, bars, etc. Catering halls, etc. You need people who want to hire you to find them staff. So that's one part. And then you have to have a stable of people to fill those wants.
Yeah, I had neither.
Right. Okay.
I had nothing. So I mean, I didn't know what I was doing, but I thought I would give it a whirl. And it was funny because I put up my website in the summer of 2004. We left to go to see my in-laws in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And I'm in Michigan, and I have a little Ericsson flip phone or whatever back then. And it rings, and it's from Colorado. And I'm like, who's this?
Right.
I answer it, and it's Noodles and Company, the fast casual noodles thing. Now, I'd worked mainly in fine dining as a chef, and so that's sort of what I imagined my business would be. But I'm like, Noodles and Company. And they're like, yeah.
And that sounds like a company that would pay.
Right. And they're big, and they're expanding into the DC market. And so they said, we need managers. And I said, okay. And they said, well, we saw your website and you sound great. And I'm like, yeah, I'm great. So then I actually got them. That was my first paycheck. It took a few months, but you're right. It was a very challenging time because I had no clients and I had no candidates, and you had to sort of, convince the other that you had it. So I'm sorry. So the first one was really was that, and then I got a few other independent restaurants and stuff, and then.
But was it a lot of I assume you and I followed a very similar business model.
Time.
Yeah, well, we both started about the same time, but I shook.
Right.
Every hand I could,
right.
I was like, I'm Nycci Nellis. This is what I do. I'm not looking for anything. I just want you to know my name. And, whether it was on the restaurant side, the GM side, the hospitality side, the media side, I took everybody I could to coffee. I was like, tell me what's happening for you. How do I help? What can I do? I put my face in front of people as a way so that they would be like, oh, have you met Nycci Nellis?
Yeah, I remember. You're excellent at that. No, I did the same thing. I mean, I went to every event I could. I networked. I met people and just sort of beat the bushes. And then, honestly, a friend of mine said, hey, I know somebody at Clyde's.
Oh.
And
Was it Maureen?
No, it was actually my brother's girlfriend at the time. Mother was best friends with Ginger Latham.
Okay. Not so bad.
Not so bad. So John and Ginger Latham, founders. And then, so they got me an interview with Claude Anderson, who has unfortunately passed, but great guy. He was their director of operations. And I remember I went over to Clyde's and I met with him, and he sat there and looked at me and obviously knew I knew nothing. And, but he was like, look, if you can find us people, we'll hire them. And we're always looking for good people. And I remember he said, I don't need people who want to change the way we do things or tell me how to earn an extra penny on the dollar. I want people who love hospitality and want to come in here. And our philosophy is make sure people leave happier than they came. And that's it. It's like, great. You got it. So,
well, and I appreciate him being like, this is how we do it.
Yeah, this is how we do it.
And don't bring in somebody here who's going to be like, I have an idea.
Yeah, no, they're like, we understand what we're doing here. Right. And obviously, they're
still here.
They're still here.
And expanding.
Yes. So, we get the old Ebbet or the new Ebbet in Reston now.
I know, it's not the same. Right, we can go down that rabbit hole in a minute. Yeah. So let's go back a little bit. So now that people understand what you do, how do you, well, we'll talk about this afterwards, but like pre-pandemic, Kathy Hollinger was on this show when it was out of the Line Hotel, the former head of the Restaurant Association of Metropolitan Washington, like 2 weeks before the pandemic.
Right.
And we were talking about labor shortages because, the wharf was just opening.
And people forget that.
Yeah. I mean, she was like, so we were brainstorming like on air, like what is the city doing to make it attractive for younger kids to get into the hospitality industry? We're talking about all those angles. So we already had a hole growing.
Right.
How were you addressing it then?
Well, I mean, I think it was a struggle and still is. I mean, having these problems of a dearth of good people in the market, it's a tough problem for everybody, but it's a good problem for a recruiting and staffing firm to have because people want to hire us and want to pay for us. But I mean, even back then, I think I was on a conference call with Kathy back in that day talking about all this stuff. And we do need programs. And there's some stuff going on with high schools now and Fresh Start program and stuff to get people into it.
Yeah, I mean, we were both there for that.
Yeah, we were both there for that. But it's still it's not enough.
It's not enough.
It's not enough. And it's sad we lost l'Académie de Cuisine, which is actually a fairly good pipeline for young chefs in the city. We lost Art Institute. So a lot of these programs are gone. Now it's really Johnson & Wales and CIA for chefs.
But that's just, I mean, it's so funny. Your head goes immediately to chefs. Right. Where my head, I'm thinking, I know we need back of house. Don't get me wrong. But my head is GMs, servers.
Sure.
Dishwasher, front of house. I'm still back of house, but you know what I mean? But my head goes to, how do we get people who maybe don't have the training? Because you and I both know, we've heard thousands of stories of, the guy who starts at the dishwasher or, started, cleaning up the dishes or, serving, who was interested in, maybe being a saucier and, stage for a little bit and then all of a sudden winds up in the kitchen. Sometimes it's a little more organic, but it's just getting people to work in the restaurant.
Well, for sure. And I mean, I think one of the problems is that, DC is a highly educated town. And I think people come here to pursue professional careers in, we got more lawyers, I think, than anybody anywhere in the country, politicians and the like. So, they're not necessarily coming here for an acting career like in LA and they're going to be a waiter while they're doing that. And like I always say, I think part of this, and you and I have discussed this before, part of the service issue in DC with training staff to be hospitable is that you do have this really, not only an educated diner, but you have this really educated staff who just kind of says when they're putting down your plate of frites, by the way, I went to Harvard. I mean, there is this sort of thing about... How's that art history?
I'm just saying, I just think that there is a thing by the way, I'm just as good as you are, even though I'm serving you. It's a problem.
I mean, I know you're fairly political and I don't want to make the show political, but I mean, in my mind, we also need to reform immigration and open up more opportunities because, throughout our history, restaurants have been a good first place for people to get their foot in the door in the economy.
They're a haven.
They're a haven. I mean, you can come here from any country and speak any language and,
Still get a job.
Still get a job.
And quite frankly, a job that today, a lot of Americans don't want.
Exactly. I mean,
so if we have this dearth,
right,
why wouldn't we do what we could to fill it?
No, we need smart immigration that handles the needs that our economy is not prepared to handle. And I mean, point in case, I mean, everybody in the city, I mean, you could go to almost any restaurant and there's a help wanted sign. I mean, I never even talk to people who are like,
scroll through Instagram. Everybody's like, we're hiring. Yeah. My phone blows up too. I'm not a recruiter. Right. I put them in touch with you, obviously. Right. But people are like, who do you know? What do you know? Like, my GM left, or, there's not a lot of, some people think it's poaching, but, people are putting out more attractive offers. I'm sort of jumping ahead. But, staff are hopscotching around town, which happens in this industry. But I think it's tough out there.
It's tough out there. And I mean, servers can certainly be rather mercenary and they want to go where the money is. And sure. I get that, but, there are things that some people are very loyal, and I think it also depends on the employer and the work environment. And there are ways that you can retain employees, even if they're not making the most money, because you're treating them well.
Well, so let's talk about that. So pandemic happens.
Right.
What happens for you?
It was bad. I mean, I thought
your hair grew down to here.
Yeah, I grew. Yeah, that's what I did. I grew a ponytail and I honed my fly fishing game. That was pretty much what I accomplished. It was bad because essentially, we are like a vendor for the hospitality industry, and there was no business. And at first, I, sort of thought, oh, well, this will only last a few months, and then I realized that was wrong. And so a huge amount of uncertainty, and I had to furlough and lay off most of my staff, and it was rough. And meanwhile, a lot of people owed us money, and that was always that was tricky to dance to do because
I can't even
you
imagine.
Can't get blood from a stone, and it was terrible.
I mean, you do know that I have people who owe me money too,
right? And
I just I just said to everybody, forget it.
Yeah, well,
you don't owe me any more money. I mean, it's different. Our business models are so different. But I was like, forget it. Like I just couldn't. It was the only thing I could do.
Right.
And I didn't want to take the loss, but I really had no choice.
Yeah, no, I mean, we definitely took some losses and, we cut some people some deals, but some people were great. And also when the PPP loans came around.
It did change things.
That did change things. I mean, that's, we got the first round and then I brought people back and then that ran out. But then the second round, you were allowed to pay off vendors. And so that's when most people did, pay them off. But I mean, I cut a lot of deals with people. I mean, you want to maintain the relationship. Everything in, your business and my business is relationships.
Absolutely.
And so it's like, if you don't have a good relationship, then, we can't do business.
Right.
And so that's why, restaurateurs should also be aware that, like, if you pay your bills on time, that's a hospitable thing to do. We like that. I mean, it'll smooth over a lot of things.
I mean, there is some hospitality in getting paid on time. I'm totally with you.
Absolutely.
So that's what happened for you during the pandemic. And as we slowly came out, I mean, it
wasn't like slowly. It was like March 21st or whatever when we got the vaccines.
Right.
And it was like a cannon went off.
Right.
Like literally my phone.
I know, but I feel like people, yes, I'm sure for you it was. I feel like, I don't know, I'm sort of in a time warp, right? Yeah. So it's 3 years ago,
right?
Basically today, that shit just shut down in the city.
That's right. It was like
March 16th. It was March 16th because the 17th was St. Patrick's Day and people were just pissed.
We're still here.
We are still here. Yeah. Thank God. Vaxxed and back. But there were highs and lows, right? Like we stuck in, then we went out, and then we had to go back in, and then we went back out. So there was all this Omicron, like all these different things. And it's really only been to me, even though I always did carefully go out,
right.
It really has been like the last year, maybe like March 2022, maybe a little bit before that.
Yeah, that it's gotten kind of normal-ish.
Yes, that it's been more, we're not wearing masks. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like things really
you don't
change.
worry about going out. I mean, like
Yes.
going out was such a hard conundrum because, obviously you may be worried about your own safety, but you're also like, am I endangering these people by making them come to this place and
Right.
serve me food and they're getting sick? And, it was a really tough time. In fact, I think that's where we lost sort of a young generation of young cooks, sous chefs, servers, people coming into the industry. I think, at that time when it was dangerous and we had plexiglass guards up everywhere, I mean, it was not fun, let's face it. And I'm sure it wasn't fun for people in the working in the trenches. And I think a lot of them just pieced out. They said, well, I'm going to go finish that degree or do whatever else I thought I was going to do.
I think for a lot of people, those who got maybe furloughed, felt, initially they were in it.
Right.
And then they were like, you keep calling me a family.
Right.
We're a family, but you're letting me go. Like,
you're letting me go.
You're letting me go.
Yeah.
And again, you said it. You can't get blood from a stone
Yeah.
because there's no money coming in.
Right.
But, in the beginning, like the Tom Colicchios of this world, they were all out there being like, we need to change the industry. We need to change the structure. And like, everybody was chasing their ass, so they couldn't change the structure. And now we're here, and there's been no structural change. There's these incremental things.
Yeah.
And now we have this huge staffing shortage, not just, way beyond what we had, not just locally, but nationally. So how do you go about mining talent to fill those voids? Because I have no doubt you have the people who are looking for talent, but how do you go about finding talent?
I mean, so all different ways. I mean, we are constantly fishing, so to speak, to use that analogy, and we're casting nets in many different areas. And I think all the normal things of, LinkedIn and, there's several websites for advertising hospitality positions like culinary agents, and we use all of that. But it's funny, I'm thinking back to like 2004 when we used to actually post wanted ads in the Washington Post in print. So things have changed. And so now we're much more starting to focus, or we have been focusing much more on social media and Instagram and Facebook. And, you notice businesses using these things, which is a good and a bad thing. I mean, I understand everybody wants to use it for commercial reasons. I like going on Instagram and just seeing my friends and not seeing 100 ads, but it is what it is.
Yes.
And so we've changed our tactics a little bit, trying to draw in more people, and that's been effective. We're fortunate in that because we've been around so long, we are a known entity here. I would say 50% of the people that we end up placing come from direct referrals.
Okay.
So like, you send us somebody that or a friend, somebody. So that's why, like, when we're working with people, we try to make the experience with CRR a very positive experience. I really want to know what your needs are and what you want to do, and try to, find the right fit for you. Because even whether you get a job with us or not, the important thing for me is that you come away saying, well, that was a good experience and I would do it again, or I would tell one of my friends about it.
Well, right, because at the end of the day, let's say you are working with a chef.
Right.
And you don't wind up placing him. He gets a job on his own.
Right.
But now in his role, he needs to hire somebody. You want him to call you. And
that happens. I mean, we've been at it for long enough that, many of the people that we placed are now restaurateurs in their own right.
Sure.
Colin McClemens of Nina May and Opal's a perfect example. We placed him years ago with Todd Gray at Equinox.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah, so
comes
full circle.
I know. Todd Gray, I feel like, is the Kevin Bacon. He's one of them.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, everybody worked for Todd Gray.
Everybody worked there.
Everybody worked for Roberto.
Donna.
Yep.
Boobin is also one of those characters. I mean, there was that great article a few years ago in the Washingtonian that sort of had the family tree, and I'm old enough to like remember those guys when they were big. Some people, you say those names and you draw a blank, but they really are kind of the our forefathers.
They're the OGs.
Yeah.
So that's why when you said, in the early 2000s, DC didn't have it. I always sort of bristle a little bit because people are like, oh, nothing was happening in DC. I'm always like, no.
So when I was at CIA in 1993, 94, Vidalia opened. So that was that, and Red Sage were like
Damn Meshes.
Were the first
And wait,
sort of regional American
was it Frank Morales? No, he didn't open up Rotation.
No, the guy who opened it, he was from Arizona.
Yeah. But Dan Meshes was the one leading the charge.
He was the owner or the principal. But
who was it? He was out from Arizona. Mark Miller.
Mark Miller.
Yeah, Mark Miller. Yeah. I remember that.
So those were big deals.
Well, they were sexy. And Michel Richard opened up Citronelle.
But
again, we're still in, the city is still sort of provincial in that there's not a lot.
All downtown.
Yeah, they're just little places, Georgetown and etc. So now that we're where we are, and you're mining talent, but you've got the thing for me, when I walk down, let's say to the wharf, for example, I'm like, oh my God, these places are big. You know what I mean? I walked into Gordon Ramsay's restaurant, I was like, there's a lot of people in here, he needs a lot. I remember looking in the kitchen.
Right.
I was like, there's a lot of staff in there. Yeah. And I have no doubt that they need that staff. And I'm sure half of them are shipped in because it's opening.
Right.
But how do you fill that?
I don't know.
Well, and what do you, let me change the question.
Yeah.
How do you recommend to restaurateurs, because they must seek your advice on wages? What do you recommend? Are they what are people giving? What's your recommendation on wages? What's your recommendation on healthcare? What's your recommendation on sick days? What are the conditions out there that these employees are expecting?
Right.
Or asking for that are getting matched?
Right. Well, it's certainly an employee market at this point. Since the industry is in high demand, employees really have the pick of jobs really and where they want to work and really, have a good opportunity to get what they need. So, we have seen since the end of the pandemic or in the last year, we've seen salaries and wages go up by a solid 15 to 20%. And that's mostly on the lower end. So i.e. hourly people and entry-level managements. Not so much on the high end, some, but not as much as the lower end.
But I think people should understand, one of the things, and you and I talk about this a lot, is the lay person who goes into a restaurant, right? We know lots of people who are foodies or people are I love restaurants, I love food, I'm a great chef at home, yada, 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 which I'm all for. It's great.
Yeah, sure.
I'm a great chef too. But there is a misconception, and I do say this on the show a lot, that these people, these lay people, these lovers of restaurant and food understand the business model. And they don't.
No.
But it's a misconception by the industry.
Right.
The industry is I understand you're in here twice a week. You love me. And they're yeah, I love you. But I don't have to pay that. They don't know the math of the restaurant. They don't understand why when they look at a plate of pasta and it's $25. So pasta costs 30 cents. I don't understand the math.
Right.
So how do you guide your perspectives, both the employee side and the employer side, to hire? And then, I don't know, is there a way to share that message with people who are foodies so that they understand the math a little bit?
Well, the math of a restaurant, was once described to me like this. It's basically 30% is your cost of goods, 30% is your cost of labor, 30% are your fixed costs, i.e. your rent and your utilities, and then hopefully you have a 10% profit at the end of the day. And that's kind of the fine dining model. And of course, if you do pizza or something more fast casual, you can push those margins to 25%. But the reality is that
But not with current food costs.
Yeah, not with current food costs. So you're seeing, inflation across the board.
Right.
And part of that is inflation in services, which is going up. And, it's here to stay, folks. I kind of have been telling my clients, look, because some of them are stuck in sort of, 2019. And I'm just look, that's not the reality anymore.
Yeah, catch up.
The average, salaries for a typical sous chef in Washington, D.C. used to be, in the $50,000 to $60,000 range. Now it's easily 60 to 70. And it's not going back, folks. People are well, I hired this guy 3 years ago and he had more experience. And I'm it doesn't matter. It's gone.
Well, plus, but to that point, if you're on Twitter or you see what's going on social media, people talking about service charges, service fees, and et cetera, there's a lot of lay people who are well, just pay your servers more or just charge more. You know,
Right.
they're so
Well,
flip about it.
They are.
Right, but they're so flip about it.
They
They're
have
like,
to.
instead of a service fee, you should just, there's a lot of demands from people not in the industry about how it should work
Right.
without understanding how it should work.
Well, how it should work,
Yes.
in my opinion,
Yes, tell me.
is that we shouldn't actually have those service charges. They should actually be incorporated into the menu price. But owners of restaurants are so afraid of raising their menu prices too much that people won't come, so they put them in these service charges. But in the past,
But the service charges get taxed.
right, but the service charge is part of the labor cost, is
Right.
my point. And so the labor costs and the food costs and your rent should all be part of the cost of the product, which is the food. And then if you want to have a tip on top of that, fine.
Right.
That should be a gratuity, a clear gratuity.
Oh, so a gratuity line.
A gratuity line, but
Like
like
in
when
Europe.
yeah.
Okay.
But like when you, but also just being willing to pay. I mean, people are paying, and we were discussing this a little bit before, but it's noticeably more expensive to go out.
Yes.
Like, we've all noticed it. If you go out to any restaurant, moderate, casual, whatever, I feel like it's $100 a head just to walk through the doors.
I mean,
And-
on the low. I mean,
on the low end.
on the low end.
On the low
and
end.
I'm not being braggy
No.
or anything like that.
No.
It's just markedly more expensive to eat out. But I will say, if you think about Europe, for
Yeah.
example,
Yeah.
people don't eat out in France or in Spain or in Switzerland
Right.
the way we eat out in the States. Like,
Right.
we treat eating out like a God-given right.
Well, that.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, 100%. But like, ask any of your parents' generations how often
often they went out to
They
eat.
went out, and it was probably like once a
Saturday
month,
night.
or once a week, and it was a special thing. I think we've gotten used to cheap food and cheap gas in this country.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Europeans spend something like up to 20% of their disposable income on food.
Right.
In America, we spend 7 to 9% of our disposable income. So we're used to having this very cheap food, accessible
But
all the
also
time.
Food
But it's like
is entertainment, right? So instead of going to the movies,
Right.
we go to dinner. Instead of going to a show, we go to dinner.
Right.
So it's become this form of entertainment that we're used to paying a certain amount for.
Right.
Right. But now that ticket, like I said to you, I was out with some girlfriends on a Monday night,
Right.
and it was well over $100 a head, and we didn't even have drinks. And that's a lot for a Monday night. Saturday night dinner, you're all going out, you're all dressed up, but Monday night in your Lululemon, you're kind of like, there's a lot of money for sneakers,
No, my wife and I have been, doing a Friday night bar hop on the Hill or various places, and because she's like, well, I don't want to go and spend $300 on the tasting menu and the drinks, and it's so expensive, and she doesn't want to eat 6 courses and whatnot. I'm like, okay, well, let's just have fun and go to bars and eat some snacks. What she doesn't actually realize, because I pay the bill, is like even those bar snacks.
It winds up costing the same.
It's like we did this the other night, and we went to Buchert's, and we went to Belga and the Betsy upstairs, and we had some drinks and snacks. It was fun, and we like supporting the local places. And it was over $300.
Oh, without a doubt.
For total. I forget exactly what it's.
I think there
but
is-
it's not like it's cheap.
No, but I feel like so David and I like to eat at the bar.
Right, me
But
too.
I feel like there's something, it's like a misconception.
Right.
You're like, well, I'm not sitting at a table, so there's no way I'm going to spend the same
Exactly.
amount. And then you spend exactly the same amount, So I'm totally with you on
I
that.
just we tried to pop into the bazaar and we didn't get in, but I told my friends and I said, well, we like fancy bars, so we'll have a drink at the bar.
Yeah.
And my friend who's a lobbyist said, well, I'm not going there. They charged me $22 for one shot of Woodford. And I'm like, all right, I'll get the first round. And indeed, it was $100 for 4 drinks. And
It's not cheap.
It's not cheap.
But can we also talk about the chairs at Bazaar?
Yeah, ridiculous
What
chairs.
is it? Those chairs are so
They're like
heavy.
thrones. They're like, you sit in them like you're the king.
I know, but I'm a little
Because you're
girl.
paying $28
I was
for
like, is
Manhattan.
somebody going
You
to
have
push
feel
me
important.
in? I mean, I was like, I'm stuck. I can't.
We had them all set up in like a semicircle. They hated us.
Okay. I think they hate everybody because they didn't like us either.
Yeah, but no, I mean, here's the thing about inflation that I just want to remind all of your viewers is like it's not going away. Inflation doesn't go backwards, and we can all complain about it, like your annoying parents who tell you that. Oh, I remember when 10 pounds of the onions cost $1. Well, they don't cost $1 anymore. They cost whatever, $5. And so, it's not going to change. And it doesn't seem actually like DC is that impacted by it. And I'm actually, in some ways, I know it's painful for the restaurateurs, but I'm happy to see the inflation for the workers, because I want people to be able to live in the city or live near the city and work in these jobs. And so getting a little bit more money for them is important to the industry. But, there's no going back to this good old day. It's just like gas prices. Like you have to drive your car if you drive a car, and you fill it up and you're like, oh my God, gas is $5 a gallon. Well, you have choices. You either drive less, you buy a different car, you carpool, but you still got to drive.
Right.
And people
you still have to get to where you're going.
People still have to eat. And so, whether you eat more at home or whether you eat out less, that's up to people's personal budget. But, the restaurant model, as you point out, can't really change, because they still have to pay the rent, and they have to pay for all that food, and they have to pay for those servers and those cooks. And it is what it is. I mean, nobody's gouging anybody. And
that's the part that I always struggle with, when there's sort of this insinuation that they're gouging people.
Right.
That I'm like, that's just not what's happening here. Like, it's just not at all. But you bring up a good point. I want to just go back to something you said. I too agree people should make a living wage.
Yeah.
I think people in this industry should absolutely make a living
100%.
wage, have access to sick leave and vacation time and
Absolutely.
healthcare, all those things that we take for granted.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we both have our own businesses, so we built them into our own businesses,
Sure.
but they were priorities
Absolutely.
for the people who work for us,
Mm-hmm.
and et cetera, and how we want to live. But housing in this city, in any city,
Right.
you mentioned San Francisco earlier,
Right.
right before the pandemic, there was some famous neighborhood restaurant in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
She closed the doors.
Mm-hmm.
She put it out on Instagram. She said, "This is a neighborhood restaurant." It was
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the restaurant.
Nancy Oaks? No. What was it?
No. But basically what she said is, we are closing our doors not because we're not successful,
Right.
but because all of the people who work here
Right.
cannot live here, and they are
Right.
driving up to 2 hours
Yeah.
to get here.
Yeah.
That is not
That's why I left that city.
right. But she was like, that is not
I was a chef there.
Right.
I couldn't afford a house.
She was like, that is not sustainable.
Couldn't afford to live there.
I did hear somebody say recently,
Yeah.
which really perked my ears up,
Mm-hmm.
that there are talks, and this is all gossip,
Uh-huh.
so don't take this to the bank, but there are talks within the mayor's office, and there are talks in people way above my pay grade about having housing here in the city for the industry.
That'd be interesting.
Which to me is a no-brainer.
Yeah.
We have all this real estate of offices
Yep.
that can be not easily converted,
Right.
but converted easily enough that can house people
Right.
for reasonable prices, specifically if they work here in the city.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, it's not even that foreign of a concept. I mean, if you think about resorts or seasonal places
Right, they
like
have
that,
places.
they bring in, a lot of the times, again, back to immigration, they bring in J-1 visas. They bring in, students and people from Europe and all over who want to come to America and work.
Right.
And so they come over for the summer or whatever, and they generally pay them well, and they provide them with housing.
Right.
And boom, boom. And then they have their workers. But you can't have the workers unless they can afford to live here.
Right. Exactly.
So-
So I hope that is that little rumor that I heard swirling.
That'd be neat.
Because to me, I love school programs like that program we went to, ProStart. I love what they're doing.
Right.
But that's not going to immediately
It's a drop in
remedy
the bucket.
anything,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And time is of the essence.
Yeah,
To
absolutely.
make some things happen. Okay, so
But I wanted to add something that I was
Yes,
talking about,
please
like in terms of this like whole idea of inflation that restaurants have gotten expensive. Agreed, but apparently, and sort of anecdotally, I've talked to a lot of restaurants over. People had the best Januaries ever.
restaurants.
So places are busy. People are going out.
Well, so here's what I love.
Right.
And this is going to sound a little callous, but I don't mean it that way.
Right.
But, when I hear somebody in the business say, so I'm sure you're hearing from everyone
Right.
that's not going well.
Yeah.
And I'm like, not everyone.
Not everyone. No, there's some places doing. Well, I mean,
But
look,
listen, remember in 2008 when a bunch of places closes and people were crying and trying like, oh, I can't believe it's closing. I was like, it was a house of cards, people.
Right.
I mean, I would never say that out loud on which places I'm specifically talking about, but I know you would agree with me. The business is a house of cards to begin with. And there, so few of them are, except for you and I could name the ones like the
Right.
Lake Dips of this world that
Right.
are just stable.
Right.
But A lot of them are house of cards, and all you have to do is pull the wrong card out and it's going to crumble. 2008 did that. The ones that couldn't make it through the pandemic, I really don't think there was one that I was like, oh, that's a surprise.
No, I mean, it's always
not that I want it.
It's always sad from a individual perspective if a business is closing or not doing well. But listen, this is a tough business and things change rapidly. If you have a run of 10 years, you are a successful restaurant.
Totally agree.
If you have a run of 20 years, you are exceptional. If you've been around for 30 years, that's amazing, but also you may be dated at that point, and it may be time to move on or do something else. And you hear about these restaurants closing, and I know it's sad for the people and sad for the neighborhood, but really it's kind of like, for lack of a better term, it's just like not everybody can survive this industry, and in some ways, I looked at the pandemic, I'm like, well, good, maybe there'll be less restaurants, more workers available, and there'll be some sort of balance in the market. And
instead we got the total opposite.
But then the opposite happened, and this blew my mind. People have been opening restaurants at a insane rate. And insane. I mean, part of it was there was a backlog from places that couldn't get it.
Well, they were in process.
Yeah, they had leases signed, they had plans in the works, all that stuff, and now they're finally going it. But then also you have all these development projects like the Wharf, and you're like, exactly, you're looking at Gordon Ramsay and you're going, you're going to need like 150 workers, and where are you going to get them? I mean, so, and you'll notice.
I mean, did you do Gordon Ramsay?
No, we didn't.
Okay, sorry.
It's okay. We didn't. But by choice. But the.
I guess there'll be some tea after the show.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. No, what was I going to say? No, but I mean, one thing you'll notice is a lot of places are dinner only. Especially the more fine dining places.
I know, but I think more places. I'm going to fight you on that. More places are doing lunch now. Now, the places that all right, let me back up. DC always struggled with lunch.
Right.
Restaurants, especially in Penn Quarter and downtown area, where you would think they'd be banging for lunch.
Right.
A lot of places struggled.
Sure.
Now, the Diplomat kills it for lunch.
Right.
Now that they're open for lunch every single day of the week.
Right.
And I was at Petit Cerise, which opened 4 days ago.
Right.
They were pretty packed for lunch, but it's brand new. But I think Rossica is always packed for lunch.
Sure.
I think there are places that people go to for lunch, and I think you're seeing more places open. To me, people who don't do lunch well is because their menu, pardon the phrase, but I find their menus too masculine.
Right.
Like,
or too dinnery.
Right. Like, I don't want.
You want something lighter. Yeah.
I want something lighter, but I still want to eat. So when somebody's like, well, we have a salad and you can put a protein on it.
Right.
Like,
or it's just the dinner menu sort of cut down.
Yeah, it's unattractive.
No, but what I was going to say is I know some owners who aren't open for lunch because they can't staff it.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
So that was what I was getting at. I mean, I agree with you, but it's funny. A friend of mine was coming to town, and I wanted to take her somewhere fun, and I was looking at all these places, and I was like, oh, dinner only.
Hello.
Yeah.
On the list, areyouonit.com.
I know.
We have the list of lunch.
Yes.
And seriously, there's over 150 places on there that you can go get lunch. Now, they're not all exciting, but some of them are really good.
Yeah.
So it's worth.
Yeah.
It's worth the peruse. And we update it every week, just so you know.
On it.
All right. So I know you are. So let's talk about in your role in this business. You do have to eat out, and you do need that FaceTime with people.
Sure.
So where have you been at recently other than Bazaar, where you have been dining, and what have you been liking?
Well, I went to Opal a few weeks ago, which I really like, which is Colin McClemens' new place in Chevy Chase. So out in your direction. And there were.
No, I've been there. I've been there 3 times.
Yeah. So, he has Nina May downtown, and that was great. I went to Bar Spiro, and I really like that. After we couldn't get into the Bazaar, I know the chef at Central, and I went to Central for dinner and had a very nice dinner.
Who's cooking there now?
David Barrago. He was at Bistro de Coin for years.
So I heard. Are you the person who told me? I've been hearing really good things about Central.
It was packed.
Yeah.
It was great.
Well, that location.
Yeah.
I mean.
It's a great location.
It's a great location.
Yeah, it was. I was surprised, but it was very busy.
Do you remember that little? It's not a little Indian restaurant. There's like a high-end Indian restaurant next door, like around the corner.
I don't know.
Anyway,
Anyway,
never mind.
yeah.
Okay, so Opal.
Yeah. Bar Spiro. Yep. I've not been to Petite Cerise yet.
Well, it's been open for 4 days.
High on my list. Where else have I been? Hill East Burger for one of the best burgers
So I haven't been up there. Is it good?
It's really good.
Okay.
And
Worth the trip?
and folks, it's affordable because you go in, they're really nice. They send you, they're like, okay, we don't have a table for you yet. So they smoke their burgers. They're really good smash burgers.
Okay.
And every detail is well thought out, but it's not a fancy place. And they send you, so they're all full. So, and they say, well, go have a drink at Trusty's and we'll text you when you get there.
I love that.
Trusty's is this awesome local dive bar, $5 beers, $8 rail drinks. Where's that in the city?
Nowhere.
So
That's amazing.
yeah.
Well, for people who don't know, but who might by the time this episode comes out, Petite Cerise is from Jeremiah Langhorne of the Dabney fame, and it's his dive into French brasseries, Parisian style restaurant. A little Le Dip-ish, but not Le Dip at all. It has a very different vibe, but the food I thought the food was excellent. And I'm very excited to go back and have a more serious, I just went for lunch, but have a more serious experience. I mean, I was at Le Dip this week too.
Right.
I love going to Le Dip for lunch.
Great
And it's just
restaurant.
banging. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
The paillard, the French onion soup. I could just eat the bread and oysters. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just so good. Let me think where else I've been. Hold on, I have to think. I took my friend to Yellow today because...
Well, I have to go try that croissant now.
Okay, so it's a
Yeah.
za'atar covered croissant
Yeah.
filled with labna.
Yeah, I'm going to go eat it.
Oh yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, I want to.
And then where else have I been? Oh, you know where I went?
Where?
Shilling Canning Co.
Yeah, Reed Schilling.
Reed
He's great.
Schilling. He's great. I don't feel like that restaurant gets the attention it deserves.
It doesn't.
We had really an amazing meal. And he also uses Ovica Farms beef.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually went out to that farm. They're going to come on the show in a couple weeks.
Oh, cool.
And so it's called F1. It's a split of Angus and Wagyu.
Okay.
So
A hybrid, yeah.
Yeah, they create the hybrid there on the farm. I got to pet the cows. It's really hard to reconcile, like loving the cows
but they're
and
delicious.
then eating the cow. They are delicious in both ways.
Yes.
So I think what he's doing is really good. I would like him to get a little more
recognition. No, I think that's not. We live on the hill, so that's not far from our house, and that's a great restaurant. And he does a great job. And he's very, local, seasonal, contemporary American. He does a great job.
Yeah, I think he does a great job. And then the last place I went to, just in the last week, is Joy by Seven Reasons, which is out near me.
Yeah, I want to eat that sandwich.
I had the sandwich.
I want the sandwich.
So here's the thing.
It's like a big sandwich.
It's
right?
not that big.
Oh, okay.
I'll show you pictures.
Okay.
So here's the thing about Joy.
But it's like $65 sandwich.
Yeah, it's a $65 short rib sandwich. Whatevs.
Yeah.
So
is it from a fancy cow?
It is not from a fancy cow. I don't
okay.
know what kind of cow. They're not talking. They're not
about the cow.
So here's the thing.
They should for $65.
The
I feel.
decor is cool.
Yeah.
Listen, it's in a space that has been 1,000 restaurants.
Which one?
It's in Chevy Chase in the collection.
Oh yeah.
You know where it is.
Yeah.
It's been 1,000 restaurants, and there's a reason it's been 1,000 restaurants.
Right.
And you know this drill. Everybody who comes here thinks, well, I'm in Chevy Chase. These people are rich.
Right.
So I can charge egregious prices like $60 for a short rib sandwich. And then the restaurants fail. So now, listen, the guy, Enrique Lamardo, he has several very successful restaurants. Some of them I like, some of them I don't. I like what he's doing there, like from a food perspective. I went with women who are not in the food world. I mean, we came casual. We were just meeting for a quick Monday night dinner. Right. Some of the things were really good. And so, like the French fries are sick. I think they're coating them in either like a cornstarch or a rice starch or something.
Yeah.
Really crispy and very yummy.
Yum.
That sandwich was good. But we all got the bill at the end of the night, and they were all like, this is a lot of money for a Monday night. And my only problem I have with the server was, first of all, one of the women was Venezuelan. He's Venezuelan.
Right.
And they were kind of talking to us at the table like we were 4 girls.
Didn't really know what you're doing.
Didn't really know. And like the wine, the
Big
guy
mistake.
was like, I ordered a glass of wine. He's like, I think you're going to like this other one better. And I was like, now, why do you think that? You don't know me from Adam. Why would you think that I would prefer that one? And he's like, well, most women prefer this wine. I was like, dude, that is a gauntlet thrown.
Yeah, don't say that.
I was like, bring me both.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like, don't fuck with me. I don't like that. But
I live with 3 women. I know
yes,
this.
But that part aside, I really liked him.
Yeah.
He was a good server,
Right.
but he read us wrong. That's
wrong.
all.
Right.
And I thought it was good. I hear brunch there is very good.
Yeah.
But I also hear brunches.
Well, that's sort of
also really expensive.
well, that's not going away. But I think it's interesting to note that like during the pandemic, suburban and neighborhood-based restaurants did okay.
Yes.
You know, because
we all
people
took out from them. We wanted to support them.
Exactly.
Totally
and
agree.
so I think you're seeing too a little bit of a trend because maybe not as many people are going back down to K Street in downtown is like, oh, they're out here in Chevy Chase working from home. So there's kind of like, suburban restaurants have some traction now.
Oh, totally agree. And listen, that area, Bethesda with Mikey Friedman opening up and Kyle Bailey, the Salt Line, Aventino.
Yeah.
I know the same thing is going on in the other direction with Arlington and beyond. I mean, these suburban areas are becoming way more cosmopolitan.
Absolutely.
And therefore, those people want to eat better. I mean, it's still an educated
McLean,
clientele.
Reston, all these kind of, they're almost like beltway little cities.
Exactly.
And they all have their own sort of, orbit and they attract people. And I think it's true. I mean, people like to go downtown when they're going out. I think going into the city is fun. And so you're maybe going to do that on Fridays and Saturdays, but most people
Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Thursdays.
Well, you're a different breed. Come on. You're like a different whole thing. But the average person, they're if they live out there and they commute, they're going out there and then they're staying out there.
Yeah. No, I agree with you.
And I live in the city, which I think is super cool. And so I'm like, well, I'm going to not go way out across a bridge. Oh my God.
No, right. But to that point.
But I am going to go to GWA soon. Have you been to GWA?
Oh no, but I hear it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's great. Cranes is amazing.
Cranes is good.
Yeah.
I think what's interesting about all of that is what I try to explain to some chefs who are opening up in the environs outside of the city.
Right.
I was like, stop trying to bring DC to your restaurant.
No.
You don't need DC.
Half mile.
Yeah. Go the other way.
Yeah.
Go north or go south. Whatever the other direction is.
Right.
That's who you want coming. So if you're in the Tysons area, hit Leesburg.
Right.
Like you're now the city to Leesburg.
For
sure.
You
know what I mean? Like you're now the sexy place.
Yeah.
So you want to hit those people, not stop looking in DC.
Yeah.
They're not coming to
I have
you.
family. We have a place out near Strasbourg, and like Winchester is the big city out there, and you're like, which is another subject. But
all right. So if people are looking to get into the industry, or if people are like, oh my God, I need to talk to that guy because I have some hiring.
Right.
Tell us where we can find you on Instagram or online or whatever.
Oh God, I don't know all of my handles off the top of my head, but it's Capital Restaurant Resources. We have a website. We have an Instagram page. We have a Facebook page. We're on LinkedIn. You can just ask Nycci.
Of course, everything you hear here today, you can find on the listeryouwanted.com.
There you go. And no, we're around and we're always happy to talk to people. I always tell people who are in the interview process, never hurts to talk.
I think that's such a good point of view. I think a lot of people are afraid of wasting time, but the truth is you don't know if you're a fit for this industry if you don't talk to the people in it.
Right. And if you don't look around, I mean, we get that sometimes kind of people, I don't know, think we're bad people, and we're not. We're very nice. And everybody in my office are all industry.
That's amazing.
Are all industry veterans. And so we all know what it's like and we all get it. And, and we're nice people. And I think one of the things that we really excel at is we listen to you and we try to match you with a company or a job that's going to help you and be a career boost, but also like fit your quality of life. And, we do the best we can. And so,
can I throw this out there when it comes to the industry? And then I do have to wrap it up.
Yeah.
I think people do need to realize, especially it's when you said quality of life, that it really came to me. It's not just working in a restaurant or in a hotel.
Right.
There are country clubs or assisted living facilities,
catering.
Like there are so many options.
Sure.
In the hospitality industry. I mean, I've always said to my daughter, my one son, he's a bartender at the Silver Lion, but I've always said to my daughter, like, once you do a waitressing gig, you got it for life. You need to pick up a couple of bucks. You can go to any restaurant and be like, can I pick up a couple shifts? Like, once you have that under your belt, if you're decent at it, you can always make that money.
It's a great skill to have. But to your point, there are a lot of options. And I mean, I would say 85% of what we do is in restaurant, hotel, catering operations. However, we do have like some offshoots. So we've been placing people in sales rep jobs. We've been placing people in tech. We've been placing people like Wagshaw's has been a great client for the last year and a half, and they're expanding. So that's much more of a 9 to 5 or 6 to 3 type job. And so it's been working out for people, because they can go home at night.
I love that. I want to thank you so much for joining me today.
It's a pleasure, as always.
I'm just going to wrap up. So I want to thank you also for joining us today. Of course, as I said earlier, everything you hear here, you can find on the listareyounit.com. We are now on YouTube. Woohoo! So subscribe, please, and ask questions. Like, tell me if you have questions for Chris or ask Chris. We love to get feedback and hear where your thoughts are. Follow me at NYCCINELLIS on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Not only can you subscribe to this show, but you can subscribe to Foodie and the Beast, which airs every Sunday on 1500. Again, click on that link and you can subscribe there too. And as I said earlier in the show, staffing shortages are indeed real. And just like Chris said earlier, you can go and talk to him. They're not going to bite you. And it's the same thing when you go into a restaurant. Nobody wants you to have a bad experience. So take your kindness pills and nice. Right. A, be nice, and B, have a delicious meal and have a delicious week.
Produced by Heartcast Media.